Video games. What do they really mean? Not really. Video games sometimes do not actually mean what you believe them to mean. Like for example, you would believe that Hitman is a series about a bald man undressing other men and killing men, sometimes naked in the shower. But no, according to the internet, it's actually about misogyny. Yeah, I know it seems crazy, but if it's on the internet, it must be true. And that is not the only game to have hidden meaning, because this is the top 7 games with hidden meaning, a show dedicated to revealing what is actually at the core of some of the most famous or misunderstood video games ever made. After you see this show, you will feel obligated to replay some of these games because you will just not believe it. But I assure you that it is absolutely true. But before we get started, I must warn you that there are spoilers in this show. So if you hear a game that you haven't finished yet or don't want to have your experience spoiled, mute the audio or just skip forward a bit until you get to the next one. Everybody ready? Okay, let's get it started with number 7, Max Payne. Now, on the surface, Max Payne is a noir police story about a detective that loses his family and falls into a deep depression and then loses his last remaining friend and becomes a hunted man by the authorities after being framed for his murder. It's a story about revenge. It's a story about one man trying to get justice in a cold and unforgiving world. And it's also about the apocalypse. Well, not exactly the apocalypse, but an apocalypse. The game is an allegory for Ragnarok. And it's not just because it uses a lot of Norse-sounding names like Baldur, Woden, Aesir, Valkyr, and so on, but because the events of the game sort of mirror a bit what actually happens in the Ragnarok myth. There's the winter that precedes it, the coldest one ever, that actually shows up in the game and seems to make everything so, well yeah, cold for one and desolate actually, because even though it's set in New York, there aren't a lot of bystanders just waiting to be collateral damaged. Then there's the fact that Baldur dies, which is what sets off Ragnarok in the first place. Then you've got Odin, you've got Valkyries, you've got all sorts of things related to Ragnarok. Now granted, it's not a perfect analogy, though at the end the world is changed a bit, for Max at least, because Ragnarok wasn't about the complete end of the world. Apocalypse isn't about that either, it's about the changing of the world. And for Max, the world did change. It became a better place for him because he wasn't a wanted man anymore. He had justice, though Baldur doesn't actually come back to life. Number 6, Among the Sleep. Now if you haven't played this game, play it. If you're a new parent, play it. If you're thinking about having kids, play it. Now at first glance, this game may seem like a horror game. Yeah, you know, those jump scare infested things that infest the internet and don't actually offer that much horror. Among the Sleep is actually something more. Though it seems that some people have somehow understood that the baby was dead all along and everything is some sort of metaphorical drivel about the afterlife. No, that's not what it is. I've seen people say this constantly, and that's not what it is. If you believe that's what it's about, you missed what the game is actually trying to tell you. Among the Sleep is about child abuse. It's about an alcoholic parent that repeatedly abuses, beats, and just mistreats a child to the point where the child envisions that parent as a monster, as a demon that stalks the night. Yeah, whenever you run away from a monster in the game, you're actually running away from the parent, because that's how the child sees the parent when that parent is intoxicated. And the game doesn't pull any punches. It not only shows you exactly how terrifying it can be for a child, but right at the end, it gives you probably the biggest punch to the guts possible. No, the child doesn't die, but when the child finally confronts the parent, having just been awoken from their alcoholically induced rage, the child pats the parent on the head as a sign of forgiveness, as a sign of love, unconditional love. Because no matter how much that parent mistreated their child, that child still loves them. And that's what this game is about. And it's a message you will not see, I believe, in any other game made, at least that I know of. So do try and play it. And no, the light at the end doesn't mean that the child died. The child spent all night running around the dark house. You know, kids' eyes, they don't adjust instantly to the bright glare of the outside. Number 5, Mass Effect. The entire series, well, since the second game at least, had a bit of a tone shift in terms of gameplay and also in terms of story direction. A lot in terms of story direction. And though to some people it may seem that it was an analogy to something akin to the ship of Theseus, that because Shepard is being remade with cybernetics, how much of the actual Shepard is still in there, and the Normandy becoming an AI, how much of the actual Normandy is still in the know, that's not what it's about. They may have tried at one point to make it about that, but it's not, because if it actually was about that, it would have been better. But no, Mass Effect is a Bible story. Mass Effect is about Space Jesus Shepard and his 12 disciples saving humanity from sin. And I'm not making this up in the slightest. Play Mass Effect 2 with all the DLC. You have 12 companions. If you do the side quest for each of them, you know, the one that guarantees their survival in the endgame in the suicide mission, if you save them, they will have a halo around their character. And you don't save them because they acquired something in that quest. No, they didn't get super duper ultra collector repelling armor. No, they were saved because they believed in Shepard, in the Shepard as the game called Commander Shepard at the end. An ending for which Shepard must sacrifice himself or herself. You know, because you can't have a Jesus metaphor without the main character dying at least once. Well, Shepard died twice. Though you could actually argue that the first time was him dying, or her dying, Shepard dying, and being resurrected, and 30 days later, when the time for Ascension came, Shepard jumped into heaven, well, jumped into that furnace reactor crucible crap thing they pulled out of their ass in the last month of development because they had absolutely no clue how to actually finish the story. And all to save humanity and all the other races from original sin, building AIs. I'm really curious to see how they're gonna shoe in Space Jesus into Mass Effect Andromeda as well. Maybe they could have Space Vishnu? Number 4. Dear Esther. Now, a lot of people have tried to decipher what Dear Esther is about. When you walk through that island, you will see a lot of cryptical messages with all sorts of chemical compounds that seem to be alcohol. There seems to be some idea that there was an accident, maybe a car crash involving alcohol, but then there are also those ghosts that follow you around sometimes, or, well, not follow you around, but will randomly appear in certain places depending on the luck you have when you start the game. The narration also isn't exactly the same every time you play it, and all these elements, they actually point to something very interesting, something that a lot of people seem to continually miss, even though it's staring them right in the face. It's something that you should very easily pick up on. And if you haven't, I'm just gonna spoil it right now for you, so be ready, okay? Dear Esther is not an actual goddamn game. Number 3. Bioshock II. Of course, the main idea of Bioshock 1 was objectivism, that horrible conceptual philosophy for assholes that was envisioned by Ayn Rand. Bioshock 2, however, had a different idea to it, a different core message, one that sort of reminded you a bit of Dune with the God Emperor, and, well, but that's not actually what the game is about. Believe it or not, Bioshock 2 is about vampirism. Now just think about it. The main character, Big Daddy Delta, shoots himself in the head during the intro, and yet 10 years later, Big Daddy Delta is still alive, as if through some magic or sinister pact with Satan, and suddenly, after the first 5 seconds when he gets up, he doesn't have a reflection anymore. And I mean it, right after he gets up, after he sees his helmet back on somehow, even though he took it off and shot himself in the head, after he sees his reflection right there and then, it disappears for the entirety of the game. It's as if that's when the malevolent spirit that turned him into a vampire took hold, and that's when he was transformed into a vampire. What, that's not sufficient evidence for you? Okay. Besides not having a reflection anywhere in the game, you also feed a lot on red stuff. Yeah, those stim packs, or what you call them, the ones that keep regenerating your health, they're suspiciously red and gooey, aren't they? A bit like blood. You also seem to be somewhat invulnerable, well, at least immortal up to a point, able to shrug off damage that would kill a normal human being. Well, of course you would say, but a Big Daddy is not a normal human being. It makes sense that a Big Daddy would be able to shrug off bullet fire. Ah, yes, but you know what that Big Daddy Delta can't shrug off? Direct sunlight. Now, I ask you, how come Big Daddy Delta that can shrug off being hit in the face with a missile dies the moment he reaches the surface and is hit by sunlight? The only logical explanation is that Big Daddy Delta is a vampire. Number 2. Mario. Namely, Super Mario Bros. Now, I know I've previously said some things about Mario being about Stalinism and condoning genocide, but what the first game is specifically about is something a bit more direct. It's something ingrained in the basic gameplay of the game. Now, what's the first thing you get in the game? Not the first thing you do. The first thing you do would be murdering a Goomba, an innocent bystander. The first thing you do in the game is get a coin. First, you get the money. The second thing you do is get a power-up. You get a mushroom that makes you bigger, stronger, more resilient. Then you get the power. And later along the line, you get to save the princess. You get the woman. So, let's recap. First, you get the money, then you get the power, then you get the woman. That is literally Scarface. Remember Scarface, right? Say hello to my little friend, that is literally the same thing as Super Mario Bros. It's the same basic concept that Mario tries to teach you through its gameplay. Mario is Tony Montana. This is Scarface. You're playing the best adaptation of Scarface. While sure it may not have extra points for shooting someone in the balls like the actual Scarface video game did, but this one does let you jump on people's heads and curb stomp them into the next life. And now, number 1, CounterStrike. So, what could be the hidden meaning of CounterStrike? Let's take this logically. What is CounterStrike about? Well, it's a game where one side is trying to stop another side from committing a terrorist act. But is it really what that is about? On the surface, maybe, but let's look at it a bit closer. When you start the game as a counter-terrorist, are you fully equipped? No, you have to buy your weapons, your equipment, even your diffuser kits. And how do you get money for that? Well, you kill the enemy team, you achieve your objective, you win the round. And then you are given money, which you then must spend again in order to better be able to defeat the enemy. That does sound a bit like a military-industrial complex-driven economy, doesn't it? It's also a game where you have no choice but to become the terrorist halfway through. Or if you are the terrorist halfway through, you become the counter-terrorist. Depending on where you view the situation from, you are either fighting for what's right, or you are a terrorist trying to destroy humanity, to destroy civilization, to commit an act of evil. But not just one act, you do it again and again and again with no ending in sight. This game has been going on online for almost 2 decades, and its core message is just that. The fight against terrorism is pointless. All it does is feed a global economy of war, one from which only those supplying weapons profit from. They profit from the counter-terrorists, they profit from the terrorists, they profit from the conflict existing in the first place. They drive it. And you cannot defeat terror, because by trying to defeat terror using measures like blowing up stuff or shooting people, you become the terrorist. You become that which other people rise against to fight. And they in turn are considered terrorists in their own right because they do exactly what you have done to them, which is commit atrocity after atrocity. And the whole cycle never ends. There is no break point. There is just one moment when time runs out. That's the only way a Counter-Strike match ends. The number of rounds, the time, as you will, runs out. And that's a message we have to take to heart because time is running out. The war on terror doesn't work. It's just created more monsters, more death, more and more atrocity by each day. Something must change or we are doomed to this endless cycle until time itself will give us the boot and show us the way to the door. Well, that's it for the top 7 games with hidden meaning. I hope the next time you play one of these games, you'll wonder and then say to yourself, wow, that guy was full of shit.
If you enjoyed this show, hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Or, if you thought it was horrible, then share it with your enemies and make them suffer. We shall be your weapon of vengeance. But if you liked what you saw, you could, I don't know, maybe donate because basically YouTube is horrible at revenue by using the link in the description, or just buy my book. It's a fantasy book about, well, a lot of stuff. I guarantee it won't suck, and if it does suck, you can find me here and complain about it.